Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Shadow Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones are my guests. Welcome to both of you. And Jason, I just want to pick up on that topic because it is, I think, really concerning. And you're chairing the Federal Parliamentary Inquiry into housing affordability and supply. I know yesterday's hearing got a little heated, but I want to ask you about something my previous guest spoke about in relation to the outbreak in the Northern Territory. We know there's overcrowded housing. You're not the Minister for Indigenous Affairs or the Housing Minister, but what are your thoughts on this? How important is it that we see sort of a federal step up to intervene, to allow people, motorhomes, all of that, to be able to isolate, to try and deal with this emerging crisis?
Oh, Patricia, I mean, how much time do you have? When it comes to housing, particularly when you get to remote housing like where a lot of Indigenous communities are, the specifics of the challenges that those communities face are incredibly difficult and require, look, one of the things that across the entire housing market that we've uncovered in the sort of 8 days of hearings has been that this is a multi-government approach. These problems, challenges that we face in the housing market started at every level of government, and it is going to require every level of government to step up and fix them. We have had submissions from the Pilbara region in particular. They were very moving, similar to the guest that you've just had on. And there is things that both the federal government can do, but to be very direct about this, and I know this sounds like we're trying to shift blame. We're not. It's got to, the state governments at every single level, Liberal, Labor, need to step up and need to start taking this issue seriously, and local government needs to do so as well. And some of the regional local governments are saying as much. So it has been a bit of an eye-opener for me, as a city boy like me.
Stephen Jones?
Oh, look, I think it's a matter of priorities. We know there's a big job of repair. We know there's a shortage of housing. We know that we lost a lot of years in the early years of the Abbott government, where they effectively put all of those programs, those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander programs, on hold, and we've never caught up. But it really is a matter of priorities. You know, I find it somewhat ironic that at the same time as we've got a shortage of housing and we can't get fresh food into these communities, or we can't get the medical care that is needed, we're seriously talking about investing billions of dollars in a program for space exploration. I'm not against space exploration, but surely putting a roof over somebody's head, getting fresh food into their communities is more important than some of these other things that we're spending money on at the moment.
Look, I want to move to COP26, climate change, and Jason, moving to that issue, you want a more ambitious midterm target, but the Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce was on the program. He's against it. He talked about you and, you know, said you could go into his party room. I don't think that's your plan. But you heard him quite clearly. I know you've seen the interview because you were tweeting it. Thank you. What was clear is that there's no budging on the midterm targets. Is that good enough? Do you accept that you've lost this, or is there more? Do you think you can convince the executive of your government to go further next year?
Well, I'm going to keep trying, PK. And if I may, during lockdown, I got to watch a lot of television, and I have to say, 3 of my favourite shows emerged as being 30 Rock because it made you laugh, Ted Lasso because it made you cry, and your interview with Barnaby yesterday made you think. So I think that when we get to, let the record show that PK almost cracked a smile. I think where you get to is that when it comes to 2030, look, personally, I would like us, for a whole bunch of reasons, to at least move our target to where our projections are, which are 35%. I, however, understand the Prime Minister's argument that it would be a breach of democratic faith, given that one of the major issues at the last election was our 28% target versus Labor's 45% target. So I think at the next election and the next COP, what we will be talking about is the 2035 target. Hopefully the projections will show that we will be able to increase our emission reductions target for that COP, and at the next election we'll be able to take both a new target and an updated plan to achieve that target to the people of Australia.
Were you surprised that the government put out a statement right after agreeing to reviewing next year the target, that it put out a statement saying it wouldn't do it?
Well, no, I wasn't, to be blunt, because we've been pretty clear that we took a target to the last election and that we wanted to be true to that target. But at the same time, I understand that our position is our projections are 35% in any case. Therefore, signing up to more ambitious targets for 2030 and 2035 is Australia finds itself in a pretty good position where we can do that quite easily. But yes, I understand that we find ourselves in a position and that we need to go to the next election, I think, with an updated target, with a new plan. But look, we shouldn't ignore the fact that we have signed up to net zero by 2050, and that was an historical achievement. And that's something that this government has achieved and has been able to deliver.
Stephen Jones, Labor is yet to release its 2030 climate target. You said that you wanted Glasgow to happen, you wanted the government's modelling to come out. Both of those things have happened. How ambitious will your midterm target be?
Well, more ambitious than the government's. And can I say, frankly, I think I understand that Jason's got a really difficult job to do advocating for his government when Scott Morrison is cementing his role as the most untrustworthy and unbelievable Prime Minister in Australia's history. He signs a deal internationally and then 3 days later your Deputy Prime Minister is walking away from it and the Prime Minister is saying, yeah, we signed that deal, but we don't intend to do it. I mean, they're at the very time that they are demanding that Labor announce what its policies will be after the next election, Jason is saying that we can't do that ourselves. Frankly, that's nonsense. Labor will announce its policies. The government should adopt them. Labor will announce our policies for ambitious targets for 2030 to ensure that we're not back-ending all of the effort, that we've got a responsible glide path between now and 2050, and that we're sending a very clear message to industry that we've got to get on this road, we've got to make the transition. And the government's insistence when its projections say they're going to get beyond what they're promising anyway is frankly baffling. And it just goes to show that you really can't trust Scott Morrison and anything he says on anything, including climate change.
Jason Falinski, in a seat like yours, this is obviously a pretty hot issue, pardon the kind of, what I'm trying to do there. It is a big, big issue. Can you really go to your electorate, in next year's election, what could be March, May, let's see, and say, hey, we're going to take 26 to 28%? Are they going to wear that?
Oh, look, I think my electorate is pretty comfortable and relaxed with the fact that we will meet and exceed our 2030 target. I think they're pretty comfortable and relaxed, or they're very happy, rather, that we've signed up to net zero by 2050. And they're very happy with the fact that we've managed to reduce our emissions already by 20% on 2005 levels. Well, Australia has a very good story to tell internationally, which is that we are actually setting reasonably ambitious targets. We are meeting them, we are exceeding them. Any targets we do set, we tend to exceed. That puts us in a very small group of countries internationally, PK.
Okay. I just want to ask you about something that's broken this afternoon, Jason Falinski. The Perrottet government has approved plans to extend the state's extraordinary COVID-19 emergency powers until March 2023. I think this is pretty significant given the controversy with the Andrews government doing this. I know in the coalition state party room, MPs thought the decision was overreach. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with their views on that. Look, I understand that we've had Dale Fisher speak to us here in Mackellar. He's the Australian who's head of the Singaporean government transition to post-COVID arrangements. We should expect to see an uptick in COVID cases both in New South Wales and Victoria in the next 2 to 3 months. You may therefore need to have the capacity to very quickly shut down localities to make sure that you contain outbreaks reasonably. We need to be prepared for that as a nation, both over summer and going into winter. However, having said that, I do believe that most Australians are of the view that there has been overreach by most state governments, including the state government in New South Wales, and that some of these policies that were meant to keep us safe have now gone beyond doing that. So, yeah, look, I'm probably not someone who's going to go into the public square and speak up for these changes.
What do you think on this one, Stephen? Do you think it's acceptable that the Perrottet government and the Andrews government's doing its own version? They need longer, ability to create these kinds of laws, they say?
Look, I don't want to second guess. I don't have all the health advice that is available to either the New South Wales or the Victorian health ministers, but I would make this point. I think Australians were willing to make the sacrifice, follow the advice, abide by the health restrictions and the public movement restrictions when we were trying to fix up the mess that the Morrison government made of vaccinations. But now that we've got vaccination levels, approaching 90% in most of Australia, Queensland and Western Australia are well and truly on the path to getting there as well. I think people will be asking themselves, what is the utility of these additional measures? The booster shots have got to be delivered and they've got to be rolled out with a lot more efficiency than the last two rounds of shots were. But I think most Australians are going to say, well, if you're going to put in place new restrictions, you've got to have a bloody good reason to do it, because we're just about at our wits' ends of having these sort of restrictions put in place. So there's going to have to be a very good reason to want to revisit some of the measures that we've seen, and I haven't heard it yet.
All right, we're out of time. Very interesting comments from both of you on that issue, though. Jason Falinski is a Liberal MP and Shadow Assistant Treasurer on the Labor side, Stephen Jones, joining me there.